Hello and welcome everyone. A new episode of Money Means Business. Today we are going to discuss a number of economic files, and we are going to start with this report regarding our fiscal budget. We are going to turn back to discuss a number of issues, as I said, and we are going to start with our priorities as a state. Our national mega projects, the comprehensive sustainable development process taking place in Sinai even as we speak, and also a number of files regarding renewable energy, regarding green hydrogen, regarding the latest statements which were released by our Minister of Affairs, Dr. Mohammed Maït. A lot in this episode, so stay tuned.
During its meeting last Wednesday, the Council of Ministers approved the draft budget for the next fiscal year 2023 and 2024, which reduced growth targets to 4.1% compared to 5% announced a few days ago. This is the second time that the growth target for the new fiscal year has been lowered. The Minister of Finance said that the budget includes targeted reform measures that contribute to the primary surplus reaching 2.5% of GDP. It is the highest primary surplus that is targeted in the framework of efforts to reduce government indebtedness as a percentage of GDP, and it is also higher than the primary surplus targeted in Egypt's program with the International Monetary Fund at 2.1%. The Ministry of Finance expected that the inflation rate for the next fiscal year would average 16%. Egypt raised its expectations for revenue growth from the figures it announced a few days ago to achieve a growth of 38.4% instead of 31% announced at the time, supported by an increase in tax revenues of 28%. The Minister of Finance said that the budget for the new fiscal year indicates a growth in allocations for support, grants and social benefits by 28.2%. And this includes subsidizing food commodities at an annual growth rate of about 20%, subsidizing petroleum products at a growth rate of 24%, subsidizing exports by 462.5%, and health insurance and medicines with a growth rate of 50.4%, housing support for low-income and social housing at an annual growth rate of 103.5%, Social Security pension at an annual growth rate of 24%, as well as contributions to pension funds and citizens' treatment expenses.
Welcome back. As Egypt is celebrating the anniversary of the 10th of Ramadan victory, President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, the Supreme Commander of the Armed Forces, decided to celebrate with his fighters in the east of the Suez Canal. And he met with, of course, the fighters of the 2nd and 3rd Army Divisions, the tribal sheikhs of Sinai. He had even his iftar with them, and he addressed them. Well, in his speech, there were many important messages sent by the president, and we are going to tackle the economic side of the coin. President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi was keen to speak about what happened in the last 10 years, or to be accurate, 7 to 8 years, regarding the sustainable development projects, the national mega projects which were constructed, and still many others are under construction in Sinai. Developing Sinai was and is a priority of the state. Sinai is about 60,000 kilometers, and this means that it's approximately equaling the urban communities in Egypt as a whole. We are all living from Alexandria to Aswan on 60 to 70,000 kilometers, meaning that Sinai is equaling where we are all living on all over Egypt. So developing Sinai, it's not a luxury. It's a must. And the president highlighted the huge amounts of money and the cost, but said this is not the important issue. The important issue is the result. The results are successive successes. And to fight terrorism, of course, this was a priority, but it was not only through the security solution, but it was also through development. Fighting terrorism through development. Developing Sinai, north, south, and of course in the middle. And this was achieved not only with the state efforts, but with the efforts of the residents of Sinai. I'm not going to say, as the president said, it's not the Sinai people, it's the Egyptian people all over Egypt. And here, when we speak about Sinai, we speak about our eastern gate, our strategic Sinai Peninsula, about those people who are all the time shouldering such big responsibilities for the best interest of all of us. When it comes to the security personnel, to the sacrifices of the army, the police, the residents of Sinai, the servicemen, the officials, those who are on duty in all state institutions, they are all together under one umbrella, Egyptians. The president was keen also to say that we are going to continue with this, and nothing is going to hinder us from continuing on the right path regarding sustainable development and the new Egypt, the new Republic, Egypt 2030. Here to speak about land reclamation, about renewable energy projects, about green hydrogen, about tourism, about attracting more tourists from all over Egypt to enjoy their stay here. All the files are opened and all the markets are going to be invaded by us to invite investors, whether from Egypt, from the Arab world, from all over the world, to invest here in Egypt and in many new fields. Renewable energy is very important, and even the conferences tourism. Well, with the complete success of the COP27, which took place in Sharm el-Sheikh in November 2022, this was a very huge example. And the recommendations and the results of the COP27 cannot be denied. Until the moment, even Egypt is continuing with its consultations with the UAE, which is going to be responsible for COP28, and this is going to be for the best interest of humanity. Egypt is working not only for fighting climate change for us or even for Africa, but for the whole world. And to shed light on these issues, and particularly on the messages which were sent by the president during having his iftar with the tribal sheikhs and with the fighters of the second and third divisions of the armed forces. We are very much delighted to have with us via phone Dr. Ashraf Salahuddin, Professor of Economics. A very good evening, Dr. Ashraf.
Good evening to you.
Sir, let me speak first about the importance of developing Sinai in general. Because as I said in his speech before, very important attendees, to be accurate, President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi was keen to speak in details about the huge sums of money which were paid in developing Sinai, and saying that this is not the important issue. The important issue are the results on the ground. Tell me your vision regarding the importance of developing Sinai, sir.
Okay. First of all, one of the things that we have to clarify that the Egyptian budget, or the new budget for 2023-2024, is going to witness around 45% increase. And on the other hand, with a very high rate of inflation, with a deterioration in the Egyptian GDP, it's a must to give it back a try to things that may help in raising up or boosting up the economy a little bit. Potentials, we cannot ignore that there are huge potential in Sinai. So basically, the infrastructure is already developed there, and there is a very high potentiality of jobs increase, the businesses, factories, plants, etc. So one of the things that was maybe it's going to be a good start with the new financial year is to have a look or to give it a little bit of a push in trying to develop or push a little bit in the performance of the economic sector in Sinai. So one of the things that may help in boosting the economic development in Egypt as a start.
Yes, sir. I was speaking about this in specific for two reasons or for two questions I'm going to pose. First, because many people thought that Sinai it's only South Sinai, it's only Sharm el-Sheikh, it's only tourism, and that's it. But no, Sinai is huge. Sinai, 60,000 kilometers. Sinai is filled with wealth of treasures, and till the moment we did not have the maximum benefit from all of those potentials we have in Sinai. How do you see this, sir? What are the most important economic fields which we should invade to have the maximum benefit of having Sinai in our land?
Okay. Two things actually have to be noted when we talk about Sinai. As you mentioned, it's around 60,088 kilometers explicitly. And one of two things is very, it's not only Sharm el-Sheikh, definitely. We still have South Sinai as well as North Sinai. Also, one of the very good aspects about there is that there are too many agriculture area that with a little bit of an effort can help in cultivating at least wheat. So this is one of the things that has been mentioned ages ago, but actually it did not take any kind of help or any kind of governmental eye or something like this. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, there is a very also very good part regarding the blue economy, because Suez Gulf is surrounding Sinai from a part, as well as Suez Canal. So, and there also a little bit of mentioning regarding a very large logistics area that may be embedded there, and this is all will help in boosting the economic growth of Egypt as a whole.
Yes, sir. And also regarding the infrastructure, as you've kindly mentioned, now Sinai is not that far. With the tunnels we have, with the free highways we have, how do you see developing the infrastructure as a way to attract more Egyptians to move there? And with the new Egypt, with the new smart cities, which are now scattered all over Egypt, there is no far areas. And Sinai is now close, I think, closer even more than any other time in our modern history, if you agree with me on that.
Yes, totally, definitely, yes. With the new roads, things are coming much easier. The duration doesn't take that much as it used to take before this. And one of the things that people also have to know is that Sinai is also including a lot of religious touristic aspects that it has been for a very long period of time not demanded by too many people. But yes, I totally agree with the facilitations of the roads, the new roads. I think that these places will definitely work as a very good attractive points to many tourists, especially from abroad. I'm not talking about the Egyptian tourists explicitly. I'm even talking about the foreigners as well.
And the services introduced to the citizens, sir. Now we are talking about a university, for example, in a tour. If you were told that you are going to have a university in a tour just 10 years ago, you would just feel that it's something which is that far from the strategy of the state. Now the strategy of the state is to introduce the educational health services to all Egyptians all over Egypt. There is no more remote areas, I mean.
Definitely. You know, something else, it's not only a university, there are 4 smart new schools starting from preliminary until
Primary,
secondary.
yes.
Yes. So I mean, as I mentioned earlier, and as you noted, the infrastructure is already very well there. Too many people live there. Roads making things quite closer, and I think yes, this
Roads,
is going
tunnels,
to be.
bridges, you name it. Sir,
Yeah.
if you permit me, I'd like to move to another important meeting which took place today. Prime Minister Dr. Mustafa Madbouli had an important meeting with their excellencies, of course, Minister of Petroleum, Engineer Tariq Al-Mulla, and Minister of Electricity, Dr. Mohammed Shakir Al-Marqabi, to follow up on renewable energy and green hydrogen projects. How do you see, sir, the importance of turning Egypt into a green energy hub? Because now I think that this is going to be the future of energy, the future of the tomorrow of us.
This was one of the outcomes of the COP27, if you remember, when they declared that they have to talk a little bit and they have to give a slightly too much effort to the renewable energy. And one of the things that worth mentioning is that the European Union, even though it started to reduce all the financial help that is giving to the majority of the Arab countries, except in the countries that is going to invest in the renewable energy. So we have two success points here. From one side, we are achieving part of what we have declared that we're going to work upon since we went to since the COP27, and from other side, a very high potential to obtain a very good fund even from the European Union if we started to invest, if we started to implement, if we started to look at a little bit much more about the renewable energy.
This was my coming question, sir, regarding investing in this field in specific, because also today and during this meeting, a number of memoranda of understanding were signed between the Egyptian side and international companies. I mean, investing in renewable energy, in green hydrogen, in blue energy, as you've kindly mentioned, is it relatively new? And because of this, we need to exert more efforts to attract investors to invest in this field, or now it's the trend, as we may say, and the whole world is moving forward to continue in this track. Renewable energy, green hydrogen, blue energy, you name it.
Yeah, actually it's not that new, but it started to take all the carrying, all the finance from several entities and from several institutions all over the world. This is the trendy, the new mod, the fashionable part of the business. I mean, nowadays, whenever you'd like to give any a privilege or anything, you put it in a little bit upper stage. You have to call for the renewable energy. You have to talk about the green economy. You have to talk about the blue economy. So nowadays, we started to know that there are 8 different colors of the economy. You have the red, the blue, the green, the yellow, and the brown, and so on. But this era, this coming 10 years that started 5 years ago, we are talking about the green one.
So you are telling me, sir, that we do have a short-term plan and long-term plan. And whenever we are implementing them on the ground side by side, we are going to achieve what we want. Did I understand it well?
Yes, absolutely, yes.
Sir, one final question regarding this, because as you've kindly mentioned, these were some of the fruitful results of the COP27. Just before being with you on air, I was mentioning that Egypt is still having continuous contacts with the UAE, as the UAE is going to be responsible for COP28, and it's not only for we are not exerting these efforts only as assuming the presidency of COP27. No, we are working for the sake of humanity. We are working for the sake of the planet. How do you see the fruitful results which are all the time taking place on the ground with our cooperation and coordination with the UAE and with other Arab allies regarding the climate change issue in general?
So basically, since we started preparing for the COP27, this is going to be the bigger umbrella through which we're going to highlight all the mega projects in the country. And you will keep on hearing about this until we take it further to the COP28, which is going to take place in United Arab Emirates. And by the way, one of the things that I will have to mention that the majority of the people, of the Egyptian people who were responsible for the COP27 are now being hired as a consultant for the COP28. So this means that this is a sign of success. We've done a lot of things that was mainly acceptable by all the levels, especially the European Union. This is why some of the people who were involved in the COP27 were nominated as a consultants for the government of the United Arab Emirates to help them until the launch of the COP28.
Inshallah. Well, Professor Ashraf Salahuddin, Professor of Economics, thank you very much for your input, sir. And we wish, inshallah, next time you are going to be our guest live here in the studio to continue with discussing our important economic files. Thank you, sir, and happy Ramadan. Well, as I said, this was a very important meeting presided over by Prime Minister Dr. Mustafa Madbouli and Ministers of Petroleum and Electricity and Renewable Energy. Cabinet spokesperson Ambassador Nader Saad said that the meeting reviewed the situation regarding rationalizing consumption of natural gas used in power plant operations, as well as the developments in the implementation of the state's plan to rationalize electricity consumption and export surplus gas quantities, thereby providing more foreign currency, as we are just going through the two dimensions in the very same time. We're continuing with gas exploration, with being a regional hub for liquefied natural gas, LNG, oil, in addition to taking into consideration that the future is going towards clean energy, renewable energy, solar, wind energy, you name it. So Egypt is all the time taking into consideration that we should work in all directions in the very same time. We do not have time to waste. Right after the short break, we are going to turn back with more, so stay tuned.
The global economy is going through a very difficult and complex phase, where it faces a set of challenges that the world has rarely witnessed as a result of the shortage of the main inputs of production, the decline of manufacturing industries in many countries with a shortage of supplies. The movement of foreign investments also witnessed a noticeable decline in inflows to the countries of the Middle East and even at the global level, reaching $1.3 trillion in 2021, a decrease of 13% from the previous year. In this context, the importance of working to complete the improvement of the investment climate, establishing the principle of transparency, and working to provide and disseminate data on economic activity and macro-national variables. In addition to clearly declaring the government's directions and policies, along with limiting investment hindering legislation, preparing the necessary legislation to amend them, and quickly resolving investment disputes. In the midst of the successive crises that the world witnessed, from the corona pandemic to the Russian-Ukrainian war, President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi witnessed the inauguration of the nitrogen fertilizer factories complex in Ain Sokhna, Suez, in the presence of Prime Minister Dr. Mustafa Madbouli and a number of ministers and senior statesmen. The chairman of the board of directors of Al Nasr Company for Intermediate Chemicals, Major General Dr. Ihab Abdel Samia, confirmed that the nitrogen fertilizer factories complex in Ain al-Sukhna aims to achieve Egypt's 2030 strategy to support the implementation of national projects to expand the country's agriculture area. It's worth noting that the Egyptian strategy is represented in preserving agriculture products and cultivating millions of acres from Farafra to East Ouainet and from the Daba access to Toshka, agriculture houses and national projects that keep pace with the spirit of the times. From this standpoint, Al Nasr Intermediate Chemicals Company has made a quantum leap by producing the best agriculture fertilizers and fertilizers within its various facilities to maximize the added value of Egyptian phosphate to be manufactured in the form of phosphate fertilizers of the best international quality. During the inauguration, President El-Sisi referred to the importance of expanding the agricultural area in Egypt, stressing that the horizontal expansion by adding 3.5 million fidans in the Delta, Toshka and Central Sinai regions is equal to about a third of the area of ancient agricultural land in Egypt, which contributes to agriculture development which required efforts and time. And about what was raised in the last period about the state's lack of focus in the industrial and agriculture sectors, the Prime Minister confirmed that it is quite the opposite. These two sectors were at the top of the state's priorities throughout the last period, adding, any project needs a period that may extend between 3 to 4 years until the stage of actual work and production begins. Encouraging the role of the private sector and working to eliminate the obstacles facing it, Mustafa Madbouli made an inspection tour that included many projects of the economic zone of the Suez Canal and the port of Ain Sokhna, where he inspected a number of industrial projects of the private sector specialized in important industries aimed at export within the framework of the state's keenness to encourage and attract such industrial projects and to create an environment conducive to their expansion and development, to boost investment and boost the economy. Where Madbouli witnessed the inauguration of the logistics center of Mercedes-Benz in the industrial zone in Sokhna, where Walid Gamal el-Din explained that the project is one of the logistics centers that the economic zone is interested in, being within its scope to facilitate transportation, distribution and storage of cars to and from the port of the industrial zone in preparation for its launch in the local market. Madbouli also witnessed the inauguration of the Egypt Fanyang project for printing and dyeing textiles, one of the factories in the Chinese industrial zone, Teida, Egypt. The Prime Minister inaugurated the Kadmar International Company for International Transport and Logistics project, as well as a platform dedicated to food industries for export with a total investment cost of $20 million for the 2 phases. Madbouli witnessed the inauguration of the new production line in the factory of the Goshi Egypt Company for the manufacture of fiberglass. He also inspected the workflow for the expansion and development of Ain Sokhna port with investments of £40 billion. During a press conference at the end of his tour in the economic zone of the Suez Canal, Dr. Mustafa Madbouli, Prime Minister, confirmed that the Egyptian state is working hard in the industrial sector and is giving incentives, exemptions and facilitating procedures for obtaining land licenses and the golden license in order to reduce the import bill, increase exports and maximize returns. Madbouli pointed out that Suez Canal Economic Zone is making a great effort to attract various investments, noting the state's keenness to encourage the private sector and support its industrial projects. In the same context, President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi received the delegation of heads and representatives of a number of major international companies working in the field of managing and operating shipping lines and international container terminals. Terminals MSC to establish, manage, operate, exploit, maintain and redelivery 2 container terminals at the ports of Sokhna and Dakhila with investments estimated at about $1.6 billion of the capacity of Egyptian ports for container handling. Egypt is striving to revive the economy and increase the rate of growth from plans that the government seeks to implement by enhancing the value of the local product and industry, settling foreign direct investments, exiting the state from public companies to provide opportunities for the private sector, restructuring public debt, and a plan to advance the Egyptian capital market. Finally, the continued maintenance of social distancing.
Welcome back. Minister of Finance Dr. Mohammed Mait said yesterday that the cabinet already approved the draft budget of the fiscal year 2023-2024, which coincided with the exceptional, very hard economic circumstances globally, having its harsh repercussions on the budgets or the economies of the whole world. And here, I think the developed countries are suffering and the developing countries are suffering. Let's shed more light on this with our dear guest live via phone, our financial expert, Mrs. Sahar El-Damati. Mrs. Sahar, hello. A very good evening to you.
Thank you very much. Thanks.
Sir, let's start, ma'am, sorry, let's start immediately with those statements which were released by Minister of Finance, Dr. Mait, when he spoke about the draft budget of the fiscal year 2023-2024. And before going into the details of this draft, President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi was keen to repeat today in his meeting with the tribal sheikhs of Sinai and his fighters from the 2nd and 3rd Division of the Armed Forces. He said, don't ever think that this crisis is going to remain forever. As we were speaking about fighting terrorism as a long process, now it ended and it's history. And this global economic crisis we are all living in, it's also going to be history. How do you see these statements today, and to what extent it refers to the efforts exerted by the state to overcome the global economic crisis?
I think what he said is very logical. I mean, we have been through a lot of crises before, economically, I mean. The 2008 crisis was a worldwide systemic crisis which affected the whole financial system. It started quite badly. I remember very well, we used to listen to the news over 24 hours and very pessimistic about it. But however, I think they took the right measures, and at the very end, it was finalized and finished. In Egypt, we faced a crisis that is very much similar, but smaller in magnitude during 2016 and 2017. And by end of 2017, we overcome it, and everything was finished. This crisis, I call it, as a matter of fact, a world economic crisis, a world economic war. It started very badly by huge increase in prices in commodities, petroleum prices. The chain of suppliers practically almost stopped. Shipment was extravagantly high. Most of the countries faced huge inflation, and at the very same time, increase in interest rates, decline in GDP growth in major countries of the world. So we were facing huge crisis, and still we're not out of it. And most of the currencies, as a matter of fact, were devalued against the dollar. So this world economic crisis is affecting very much most of the countries, among which is Egypt. Hence, the government, of course, led by His Excellency and the President, are putting huge efforts in order to put proper objectives in order to cure all the problems, especially that we as a country, we have approximately more than 50% that we call low-income brackets population, and those are very vulnerable to these economic conditions.
And in all occasions, the president was keen to speak about Decent Life Initiative and about also the services introduced to those brackets. In the same time, we are going on with huge mega projects and with supporting the SMEs, because no economy can rise without having all these elements into consideration and to go into all directions in the very same time.
Exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
And from this perspective, I can say that, I mean, the general objectives of the budget this year, or for 23-24, were primarily try to achieve economic and financial growth as indicated in the plan and the strategic plan of Egypt, and also approved more or less by the IMF, curb inflation, decrease local government debt, decrease the budget deficits to become 6.9% of GDP, achieve economic competitiveness, achieve proper financial discipline, reach a 4.1 growth in GDP during next year, inclusion, of course, of private sector.
Financial inclusion, of course.
Yeah.
And to return back to some of the statements which were released by His Excellency Minister Maït, he described the financial appropriations for investments as unprecedented, saying that they hit 360 billion Egyptian pounds out of total investments amounting to 586.7 billion. If you want to elaborate on that.
Oh yes, of course. The 306 billion is for it's an allocation actually for investments, for general investment, and this is going to be financed by the resources of the countries, while the remaining, which is the difference between the 306 and 586.7, I think this is going to be through government debt. So this is going to be for the general investment purposes in terms of leading to job creation and improving the services provided to citizens. In addition to that, he allocated an amount of 529.7, which is considered, which represents a 48.8% increase over last year. This is a substantial amount.
Sure.
And the reason for that is to achieve a number of core objectives by the 529 billion, which is supporting grants and subsidies primarily. This is the purpose of which, and it exists to lead to actually improving the investment climate, achieve economic competitiveness, financial discipline, support of exports by allocating 28 billion to support export. As a matter of fact, I consider export increase in industrialization, low import substitution as the new triangle that the strategy of Egypt is depending on. Hence, that was the strategy was put in May in 2022. Hence, all of these amounts allocated, I mean, we've seen numbers growing by 55%, 48%, things like that. And this is to work on those three basic initiatives, in addition to which you have two more important objectives: inclusion of private sector, it goes without saying, and also improving investment to Egypt, which is the FDI, a foreign direct investment to Egypt.
Foreign direct investment. And to echo what you have just said today, President Sisi signed law number 15 of year 2023 on legalizing the conditions of unlicensed industrial institutions. Of course, this is for the best interest of our industrial sector, and this is to achieve more success and to fight corruption, to implement the golden license, to help those who were unlicensed. Well, you name it. We were very much delighted to have with us via phone Sahar Damati, our financial expert. Thank you very much for your input, ma'am. Have a very good night and happy Ramadan. And by this we come to the end of our episode, but we are going to leave you now with a quick look at the most important economic events which took place throughout the past 7 days. Till we meet again same time on Nile TV International. Many thanks for watching. With all my love, this was Nermeen Abdurrahman.
The Monetary Policy Committee of the Central Bank of Egypt decided in its last meeting to raise the rates of the overnight deposit and lending return and the price of the main operation of the central bank by 200 basis points to reach 18.25%, 19.25% and 18.75% respectively. The credit and discount rate was also raised by 200 basis points to 18.75%. The General Investment Authority announced the approval of the Council of Ministers to grant the Golden License to 2 new companies. The first to establish and operate a factory for the production of household appliances, and the second to establish and operate a factory for the production and assembly of durable consumer goods and electrical appliances, provided that the first phase of both factories is operational by the end of this year and the end of the quarter, the last of 2024. Dr. Rania Al-Mashat, Minister of International Cooperation, and Dr. Ali Al-Musilhi, Minister of Supply and Internal Trade, Minister of Agriculture and Land Reclamation, witnessed the signing of a grant agreement of $40 million provided by the European Union, and through the agreement, the Italian Agency for Development Cooperation will cooperate with the Ministry of Agriculture to implement the special component supporting wheat and grain production with a value of 25 million euros, as well as cooperation with the Ministry of Supply to establish field silos with a value of 15 million euros. The Egyptian state is expanding in achieving great achievements in renewable energy projects to keep pace with the global trend, as a report by one of the research institutions revealed that the Egyptian state is jumping to lead the world with great projects for clean energy, as Egypt is implementing many green projects, and it has also launched many green strategies, including a change strategy climate for 2050. Egypt reduced its target for economic growth during the next fiscal year, at a time when subsidies directed to food commodities and fuel increased by about a fifth, as Dr. Muhammad Maid, Minister of Finance, said in a statement to the Council of Ministers that the government targets a growth rate of 4.1% in the next fiscal year 2023-2024 from 5.5% previously, and achieving a primary surplus of 2.5% of GDP. The Egyptian Stock Exchange indices varied at the end of their weekly dealings in the last sessions of March, as the main index rose marginally, while the EGX 70 and EGX 100 indices declined due to foreign sales pressures. Amid high trading, and the market capital lost £4 billion to close at 1.049 trillion. The volume of trading in shares amounted to 410.5 million securities at a value of 1.9 billion Egyptian pounds, and Egyptian transactions recorded 87.18% of the total transactions, while foreigners accounted for 5.45%, Arabs 7.38%, and the rest of the transactions were the share of individuals by 70.82%. The official Gazette published President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi's ratification of the agreement establishing the new development bank of the BRICS bloc and Egypt's accession document to the bank. The new development bank agreed to accept Egypt as a new member during the BRICS Leaders Summit meetings in December 2021, and Egypt became the new fourth member, as its membership was accepted within the first expansion of the bank's global reach and was preceded since September 2021 by Bangladesh and the United Arab Emirates and Uruguay. A report was issued by Focus to Move, which specializes in car market research, on the decline in annual car sales in Egypt from 244,000 units in 2010 to 187,000 in 2022. a decline of 57,000 with a contraction rate of 23%. Minister of Tourism and Antiquities Ahmed Isa announced the launch of a set of new facilities offered by Egypt to obtain a tourist visa for foreigners, most notably the introduction of a multiple entry visa valid for 5 years for $700. Isa said during a press conference that the new facilities come within the framework of the state's keenness to push more incoming tourism, pointing out that these facilities are a step on the way. The Foreign Trade Report issued by the Central Agency for Public Mobilization and Statistics indicated that during the year 2022, Egypt supplied ships transiting the Suez Canal at a value of $1,150 million and diesel for $132 million. According to informed sources, Egypt is seeking, in cooperation with companies from the private sector, to establish 5 new factories, with investments amounting to £2.5 billion to produce up to 100 items of pharmaceutical raw materials until 2025. The aim of the new factories is to provide up to 20% of the market's needs for pharmaceutical raw materials to reduce imports, save currency, and export part of the raw materials abroad.